7.4 million homes underserved in terms of housing in the country.
Whoa.
Right? And what that translates to is that 50% of renters in this country pay more than 30% of their income on rent.
Jeffrey Jaeger is the co-founder and principal of Standard Communities, and for over 20 years, he has led more than $6 billion in real estate transactions, helping build one of the 50 largest affordable housing portfolios in the U.S., with over 30,000 units across 22 plus states.
My boss is here, the seller is here, this broker's paying for everything. Like somehow I'm on the wrong side of this transaction.
Yeah.
Right? And then so I pull up closing, and I'm like, oh my God, he just made, it was like $480,000 in a single transaction. You got to really learn the fundamentals of the business, and then you need a mentor. It was probably 24, 25, saying like, hey, I want a path to be an even partner with you guys. And they were kind of looked at me like I was crazy. It's like, oh, we sold about $5 or $6 billion worth of real estate last year. I'm running through these brokerage numbers, and I'm like, what are you doing with all that capital? The idea was always, if we found good deals, we'd find money. They tell you it's a $20 million deal. You look, there's a $17 million loan on it, and then we would run the numbers, and we're like, this deal's worth 11.
What is the hardest part about this? Like, why were you guys so successful in growing to as big as you are versus someone else?
I mean, it was...
This episode is supported by Citizens Private Bank. Citizens believes your attention is a force. It's built your world, your vision, your legacy. But wealth brings financial complexity that can consume the most valuable asset, your focus. That is why Citizens Private Bank, now in Los Angeles, gives you a dedicated team with one point of contact who understands your full financial picture, including specialized real estate financing. I'm a client myself, and I have been impressed by how seamlessly they bring everything together with thoughtful, tailored support. Let Citizens focus on your wealth so you can focus on your world. Connect with a banker at citizensbank.com/no vacancy. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. This episode is with Jeff Jaeger. It was absolutely incredible. Jeff is one of the smartest people I know when it comes to affordable housing. His company, Standard Communities, owns 30,000 units across the entire country and wants to get to 50,000 by 2030. We talked about where affordable housing was when he started back in 2001 to where it is today and what that entails in today's current environment and where those dollars are coming with the government, and then where it's headed in the future. And we talk about the whole step of the way and how you potentially can take advantage of the current situation so that when the opportunity comes, you can make the most of it. I learned a ton in this episode. This is one of my favorites that I've ever filmed, and I hope you guys enjoy it as well. Enjoy the episode.
How did you get started originally?
In brokerage?
In brokerage.
It was one of those things where I grew up in Sacramento, Northern California. I had some family friends who were in development and did some affordable stuff. And then I had some other family friends who were brokers who introduced me to brokers down here because I wanted to live in SoCal. So I interviewed at a bunch of shops, and this was right out of college, 21 years old. And one shop that gave me a chance was
like 3 years ago.
Yeah, I know, right? 8, if you can believe that.
Okay.
Gone by so quickly. Was this company called Matthews.
It's 2017, 2018.
Yep, I graduated 2017. So this was June of 2018. And Matthews, they're like, yep, come on in. You're going to call Koreatown, and here's a phone, and make some dials.
All multifamily?
All multifamily.
Yeah.
And only in 5 zip codes.
Yeah.
And that was it.
So I started in investment banking, and then investment banking / investment advisory work for a pension fund advisor. But then a couple of years in, I met a couple of guys and joined on the principal side of a couple of guys who owned a brokerage company.
Oh.
So I saw it a lot behind the scenes.
Oh.
And I sat like in the bullpen with like all the brokers.
So they had a brokerage and a principal side.
They had spun off. The guy that I started working for at the time was the first broker who had really spun off from Marcus & Millichap, like back in the 70s.
Oh, no way.
And at the time, like it was very controversial. George had sued them, and it was like, and they won their case and opened up their brokerage shop in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And that Marcus & Millichap mindset of like, kind of wearing both hats of like, George obviously owns a bunch of companies now as principal.
Yeah.
And also as Marcus & Millichap. They had bought a number of deals through the RTC days, and so had this kind of smaller real estate portfolio that had a fantastic basis on, and it found some really interesting niches on the brokerage side that translate into deal flow for them. So once they found kind of like the types of deals that really worked, then they started buying those themselves or finding guys they were brokering to say, hey, I'll bring you the deal. Let me do 50% or whatever
Got
it might
it.
be at the time. So saw that. I saw a bunch of guys covering, like in San Francisco, it was like one guy I just remember I asked about Korean because I remember getting hired and he literally picked up speaking Chinese in Chinatown and like over the course of like 10 years,
Yeah.
right, became like really fluent in Chinese and like built this niche of like, he was like a powerhouse of like 4 to 10 units in Chinatown and like control as like a Caucasian broker, like controlled that market.
That's crazy.
And like, basically dominated there. So like I saw a lot of that coming up in the business. And a lot of respect for that hustle.
My goal is now to learn Korean because that would be badass. So I just whipped out some fluent Korean. So you started out in private equity. Walk me through kind of, I guess, from then to where we are today.
Yeah. So I started, kind of doing pension fund advisory work in which we had a number of clients. I was working as an acquisitions analyst doing, anything from hotels. Like we worked on.
And what year is this?
This is like 2001.
Okay.
2002.
Okay.
We worked on like the Mondrian. Well, now it's the Mayborn.
Okay.
Right? But like the Mondrian hotel
Wow.
deal. Before that was done, it was a land entitlement play in Beverly Hills. I remember working on that. I remember, working on the twin kind of towers here in Century City as office deal.
Oh, shit.
Right. So we did everything.
That's
it
what
was
office
at the
was.
time.
Yeah.
It was called Lend Lease Real Estate Investments. It was this conglomerate of basically different pension fund and insurance capital that they were pooling and buying. And it was a great job, a great learning experience to learn all products and like how to.
So you guys were buying?
We were all buying.
Got it.
Right. And asset managing.
Got it.
On behalf of like large institutional owners. And our job was to basically find acquisition opportunities, bring them to an investment committee, and then the committee would work with the portfolio managers that manage different accounts and say like, okay, you guys think this apartment deal is interesting. 2 portfolio managers, one for a value add fund, one for a core fund, one for like a separate account for like Ohio teachers would speak up and say like, I think that's all a fit. And then we would have an internal mechanism to say, okay, that deal gets allocated to this, pocket of capital.
Oh, wow.
But you were just seeing so much. We saw every real estate transaction possible across every sector. It was like the best place to start as someone getting out of school. Then that got merged in with Morgan Stanley and kind of merged into the investment banking platform. And I sort of peeled off when that started happening. I remember sitting. There was the head of the office. I remember him coming in for a speech as we were doing the merger together. And he's like, here at Morgan Stanley, we don't break people. We just bend them. Right. And I was like coming in from like 2 years out. I'm like, okay, now I got to go from the pension. I'm seeing all product types doing, kind of what I think is the most ideal job on the planet for learning real estate. And then you're going into doing pitch books and investment banking and like really more hardcore analyst work. And for me, I just felt like it wasn't going to be the right fit. And so I had met a couple of guys through that process on a deal. I remember specifically, it was a deal we bought in Rancho Cucamonga. JPI was the seller.
Okay. We
We were the buyer. We went to the closing party and the broker who took us on a golf outing up in San Jose and had paid for, it was I forget the hotel, but it was an incredibly luxurious hotel. Great golf outing, great, wine and food. And I'm looking at this closing party and all these people he's invited. I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, my boss is here. We're on this thing. The seller is here. This broker's paying for everything. Like somehow I'm on the wrong side of this transaction.
Yeah.
Right. And then so I pull up closing, and I can't find his fee. Right. So I call the title company and I pretend effectively to be the seller.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, I just, can you, I was like, I'm working with the seller. Can you send me a copy of the seller's closing statement so I can look at it, et cetera. So they send, a copy of the closing statement. I see like there's the fee. Right. On the sales side, I'm like, oh my God, he just made, it was like $480,000 in a single transaction, and I'm at my salary level at the time. I'm like, okay. And then I started doing the numbers at the time in 2001, 2002, the condo craze was going on in California. And so there was a moment for like 3 years where every single thing you could find in this apartment building, if it had a condo map on it, it was like liquid gold.
Done.
Right.
Yeah.
And people were paying 2 caps and, 3 caps for these things. Right. And the guy that had brokered this transaction was also doing a ton of these condo deals. So that's what I said, like, how much in transactions did you do last year, total volume? It's like, we sold about $5 or $6 billion, worth of real estate last year. And I'm running through these brokerage numbers and I'm like, what are you doing with all that capital?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, we're investing some on the principal side and we're trying to find apartment deals. And I'm like, okay, well, I would like to work with you guys, on the principal side. And so he brought me in to meet with the guy who had owned the brokerage company at the time. And the company was called Arroyo & Coates. And so I came in there and met with Tom Coates, and we hit it off. And he said, why don't you come in and asset manage, my stuff? But it was a very entrepreneurial environment, very much a brokerage mentality.
I was going to say, if
so
a broker and then running his stuff, it had to be like a brokerage office.
Yeah, and I came in, like I remember the first day I came in, like he had someone who was asset managing his stuff already, and he never told him that he had hired me. And I came in and I'm like looking for files, and he's like, "What are you doing here?" And it was a really awkward, day or two as when we first started. And so that all got sorted out. And pretty quickly, as I kind of started managing their deals, I said, hey, like the real concept here that I want to do is I want to go buy deals. I want to use your guys' track record of what you've done, which has been really successful, and the story of the fact that you guys have the brokerage shop. So we have a pulse on the market, and let's go buy a ton of deals. And so I helped raise outside capital and organize an actual company. So we founded the company together.
Got it.
Which is a company called Jackson Square Properties.
Okay.
That's in the Bay Area. We bought about 15,000 units from like 2003 to maybe 2006, 2007.
No shit.
So we were super active, built a team that was, probably 20 or so people. And I was COO of that business.
Did you feel like you knew enough about how a deal worked at that point? Like, were you
it was like a really incredible opportunity. I remember Tom sitting me down and saying, hey, when I was 22, someone gave me the opportunity to, kind of start a business or run a business.
Yeah.
And so I'm a big fan of, young, hungry guys who can do that. I mean, looking back, I had, definitely, not enough knowledge to be able to run a platform at that time.
That's a lot of units.
But he allowed me to I just sat in his office and was like a sponge. Right. So like I would sit in his office for most of the day, do joint calls with him when we first started. And then at night I would work, and I would work till like, 11, 12 o'clock at night. I'd get up in the morning, do it again, every single day. And just trying to there's so many great stories that I think for anybody who starts the business, you got to really learn the fundamentals of the business, and then you need a mentor at some point. And that was like my mentorship time. And things, about leverage in real estate. When I say leverage, I don't mean debt, like just getting pushed around.
Totally.
And so how those things fall, how litigation works, how that, kind of factors in. I remember a specific story of, one of the guys that he worked with, serving us with a lawsuit. And, he would call and, he would say to Tom, like, hey, just because we're, in litigation doesn't mean we can't do business together, and like, it just, these things like blew my mind at the time. Right. And so I think that was a really good learning experience. And so I worked there for a number of years. I really, as I grew that business and 2007 happened, Scott Alter, my partner at Standard now, and also best friend who run the business together, we were both in San Francisco at the time. And so Scott was at Stockbridge, which is a major private equity firm in the Bay Area, and helped at the beginning stages of that firm. And so when 2007 was happening, we kind of saw the writing on the wall, like, okay, there's going to be some really interesting opportunities coming. We both weren't sure whether to take advantage of that through our current shops. I went to those guys and I kept saying, hey, I'd love to, I want to be more of a partner, and, I'm running the business, et cetera. There was a big age disparity between me and the guys at Jackson Square.
20 something?
I was probably 24, 25, saying like, hey, I want a path to be an even partner with you guys, and they were kind of looked at me like I was crazy. And so it made sense at the time to kind of decide to go on our own and start our own thing. So we started in 2007. We opened up shop for Standard. We moved down to LA. We felt it was going to be way more entrepreneurial in LA than San Francisco. San Francisco is really controlled by a lot of old line real estate families. And so when I think about interesting deals that would pop up, LA had a ton more.
Yeah. Are you from LA?
I'm from LA originally, born and raised. So there's that as well.
Got it.
And my parents were super happy when I came back down.
And you were 25.
I was 25, 26 probably.
When you started this company.
We started Standard originally.
Okay, give me the plan. You and Scott are like, all right, we're going to start a company. Did you go and find money? Did you go, what gave you the confidence to say, okay, we're going to figure this out?
Yeah, I think that it's a really good question. We had a lot of debates when we first started. Scott definitely felt like we needed to have a deal in tow. We need to have income coming in. We were a little bit in different places because Scott was leaving a really high-paying, great job, but it was a job, right? And when I had started Jackson Square, I had done a bunch of deals and I was getting distributions. And so whether I left or stayed, that was staying in place, right? So Scott was very much pushing at the time saying, hey, like we got to have something if we're going to go start this business. And so we sort of met in the middle, and said, okay, when we first started, we said, okay, let's try and do, some consulting work and figure out how we can get this thing started. And the idea was always, if we found good deals, we'd find money. Right. And so we just kind of came with that mentality of like, let's not make it about like having to do a bunch of things first. Just go find good real estate. It'll find a home. And we did some odds and end things when we first started to just keep the lights on.
Sure.
But really what happened is 6 months after we started, Lehman blew up. Right. And so like we knew it was going to get bad and we went in thinking there was going to be opportunity. And then all of a sudden it was so bad that everything froze.
Yeah.
So we were talking to brokers, talking to people, and then all of a sudden they're like, we can't sell, right? Because I mean, you're working on a deal, $20 million deal, right? And you get, they tell you it's a $20 million deal. You look, there's a $17 million loan on it. And then we would run the numbers and we're like, this deal's worth 11.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's like, well, you're talking to the guy who's representing the seller and they have nothing to sell.
Yeah.
Right. So then it just sat there.
Wow.
For a moment in time. And so then we had a panic attack for the first 6 months of like, what are we like, actually going to transact on?
For sure.
And really, I think that, where we first dove in, we started buying distressed loans is where we first, kind of, and also at the time in the affordable housing market, Fannie and Freddie were the largest buyers of tax credits. They were probably buying 60% of the tax credits across the affordable housing space. And that all stopped come 2007. And so when that happened, the tax credit market also in affordable housing ground to a complete halt. So we then were kind of retooling and thinking, how do we take advantage of the situation? We knew it was a generational opportunity to get in there. And it was just, how do you enter and kind of figure out your entryway point? So we were trying to buy tax credits, from different groups. We were trying to buy distressed loans, anything we can get our hands on. So we actually started on the distressed loan side, buying a portfolio of distressed loans. And really from there, we bought probably 20 or 25, and we were pretty active in 2008 to 2010.
Where's the money coming from?
The money at first was coming from basically passing the hat, friends and family. The first two that we did were, we bought a distressed deal in Venice, California.
Yeah.
And then we bought I remember two apartment buildings in Manhattan and Harlem that were like, they were like $3-4 million loan sizes. And like Scott and I bought those mainly ourselves with a partner.
Okay.
That was our management partner. And so, didn't need a ton of outside capital.
Totally.
And then we did a few deals with some institutions as we got bigger. And then the market just shut off like in a day. And we're calling banks and nobody's selling us deals. And we realized that what was happening was that the government had stepped in to bail out all the banks, right? And so all of a sudden they didn't have to sell paper anymore.
Got it.
And that's when this light bulb went off for us of this wave of, the government involvement in multifamily. And over time, I mean, if you look back from even, kind of World War II on, it's been this slow progression of housing being this quintessential, infrastructure effectively in the country. And, governments, local governments and state and federal have been getting more and more involved as that's been progressing over time. And so we sort of just, this light bulb went off for us of like, hey, we need to focus on figuring out how to get involved and effectively on the affordable housing side. And we felt like that's where the funds were going. That's where the national interest was going. And the government needed a partner to help deliver on its mission of affordable housing. And we wanted to be that chosen partner for, either the state, city, or federal government in delivering that housing. And so we retooled our mission, and really focused on building a mission-driven for-profit national developer. And from there, kind of, it really has been all about scaling, standard. And then we've started a number of other businesses kind of along the way as well, but they've all been sort of, offshoots and tangential to what we really viewed as that core philosophy of public-private partnership and, kind of figuring out where to align ourselves in bringing private capital into what the public was looking to accomplish.
At Jackson Square, did you guys do any affordable stuff? Or
so we did. So so they were primarily market rate guys though.
Okay.
And the 15,000 units we bought, 90% of it was all market rate value add, housing.
Yeah.
the deals that they had done previously, when I kind of went and scrubbed their track record and said, okay, we're going to go pitch to institutional capital.
Yeah.
And I looked at what their most successful deals were previously. I started pulling up these old kind of tax-exempt bond deals. It was pre-tax credits, right? But there were these kind of older structured bond deals, and they had figured out really, how to read those documents, understand what you could do with the bonds. A lot of the developers did not understand that, and so they were arbing on that system of finding, as a broker, these deals that came with tax-exempt bonds. They would buy them and then restructure the tax-exempt bonds. And so I learned that business from Tom and kind of the tax-exempt bond side. And then when I was there, sort of just picked up the tax credit side, which was another layer on top of that, but they had never done tax credits.
That's LIHTC is a hard business to wrap your head around. It feels like it's, physics times 25.
Well, I always say, if it's not being explained well, then someone doesn't understand it really.
Got it.
Clearly.
Okay.
Honestly, it's really not rocket science at the end of the day. And you do need to have a bit of a structured finance background to understand some of the stuff that we do in the space. But, really, I think if you come at it from the tax credit side to start with, I think it's harder than coming at it and learning the tax-exempt bond finance side of it.
Okay.
And then layering the tax credits on top of it. So towards the end of my time at Jackson Square, I did a couple of large deals that we had converted an 800 unit market rate deal, both in the suburbs of Chicago, that we converted from market rate to tax credit. And those were really successful. And so I left on that note of those being really successful and knowing that business. And so a lot of the people, when we first really dove into the affordable space, were people that I had met and connected with through those couple of deals and were willing to kind of work with us as we did the affordable stuff.
So my mom's going to be watching this.
Okay.
And she doesn't know about real estate at all.
Yeah.
Explain LIHTC, explain affordable, explain to the lay person, right? And I know what I'm talking about, but even I have a trouble understanding this. Can you please explain capital A affordable?
Totally. So in this country, and you may or may not have heard this, but we are suffering from a huge affordable housing crisis, right? So just to throw some stats and some numbers at it, right? Statistically, they think that we are about $7.4 million homes underserved in terms of housing in the country.
Whoa.
Right? And what that translates to is that 50% of renters in this country pay more than 30% of their income on rent.
You said 50%?
50%, more than 50%, right, are what you call rent and burden.
Yeah.
Right? Where they're paying more than what is typically thought of as 30% of your income in rent, right? And so that's a huge drain on the economy, right? So you have, they estimate in California, it's drained, $60, $70 billion out of economic growth in California based on people being economically burdened in their rent. And you have the percentage of renters has continued to go up, especially in this cycle, right? In which, coming out of 2007, we haven't built as much housing and interest rates going up now. Housing costs just incredibly expensive. I'm sure as a young person looking at buying a home, a mortgage does not look like a pretty instrument at the moment.
No.
So most people are preferring to rent these days.
Yeah.
And those numbers, even though they're slow and they tick up by, we go to being a 62, 63%, renter nation, that those small percentages are huge in terms of the numbers that are driving into rent, which drives up rents, right? So just start with that context, right?
Yes.
And so the low-income housing tax credit program, I think in order to understand it properly, and a lot of these things, you really have to study the history on it, right? So, you can look at what it does today, but really where did it come from and what was it in reaction to? And it was in reaction to prior to LIHTC housing, which was created in 1986.
Okay.
Right? So that program came in, and I'm sure you've heard in being real estate, the tax law changes that happened in 86, where they got rid of active versus passive losses, and people used to be able to write off entire buildings,
totally,
everything else, right? So at that time, they passed the LIHTC program or came into existence. Previous to that, in the 70s, right, and earlier from the 60s, you had really HUD was the big player within housing, and was doing effectively Section 8 programs for both subsidy and also financing on building projects. So if you wanted to build an affordable housing building, right, you got a rent subsidy contract for your building in which you were guaranteed. So I'm going to a market like Stockton, and I need to build this tower to build, high density housing. I have no idea, that someone's going to actually rent this thing. So HUD would say, look, we'll make sure that you have renters because we're going to provide subsidy, and we'll pay you $1,000 a month, in rent
Got
for these
it.
units, and we'll give you your mortgage to build it.
Wow.
So that program was the most successful program that's created housing in this country. So most of the high-rise affordable housing that was built, built millions of units in this country from the 70s.
So like the
you know,
brownstones in New York is like
a lot of those were built using
Okay.
this program,
Okay.
right? Anywhere you see like a housing tower, and you'll see a lot of them like in Koreatown. There's some like concrete, buildings are in the
Yeah,
70s
yeah.
have like a subsidy
on
contract.
Gramercy. There's one. On,
Yeah.
yeah. I know the deal.
So there's a number. I mean, like one of ours that's there
Yeah.
is under this program. So that program ran really from the 60s to the 70s, right? And then Reagan came in and said, hey, we're going to end this program, part of tax reform and trying to cut the federal budget and giving more power to the individual. And that's when they switched from subsidies on the buildings. And the first time they said, we're going to give you a Section 8 voucher. And you as a tenant can now get a voucher. And that happened around like in the early 1980s.
Yeah.
So I kind of put that context there.
Yes.
And they also had done tax exempt bonds, right?
Okay.
At the time, which were a huge subsidy when interest rates were at 15%.
Yeah.
And you said, okay, you no longer have to pay tax on your mortgage and on the interest that you're getting. So a bank might say, hey, instead of lending you at, 10% or 12% and paying tax on that, I'll lend you at 7%, right? But I don't pay any tax on the interest I receive.
Got
Right. And
it.
so that was a huge subsidy on the difference between 7% and 12%.
Totally.
Right. So as interest rates have been declining since the 70s pretty steadily, which we've all gotten the benefit of in real estate, that subsidy has been getting smaller and smaller. So today you have a loan that's at, 4.5%. I mean, back in 2001, 2002, they were making loans at 3%, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There was nothing to subsidize from a tax exempt standpoint. I mean, maybe they would do it at 2% versus 3%, but it really didn't make much of a difference on the buildings. And so that subsidy was getting smaller and smaller. The HUD programs got cut, and they saw a huge drop off in the early 1980s in housing starts. And so to combat that, they passed the low income housing tax credit bill. And the idea was to use the IRS to incentivize private capital to go in and build affordable housing. And so really what it is as the developer who builds the housing, it qualifies for a program in which somebody who's a taxpayer of the US government can effectively invest into our deals. And in lieu of paying tax, they receive benefits for having invested in our affordable housing deals, and they get a credit off their taxes.
Okay. Got it.
And so it's
like a write-off.
It is. They get to get depreciation on the investment as well.
Oh, okay.
And they also get the tax credits back. Better than a write-off, though, it's dollar for dollar. So if you owe $1 of tax, you get $1 credit, back off.
And you get to depreciate it?
And you can depreciate your investment as well.
Wow.
So what a lot of people don't understand, you talk about selling tax credits.
Yeah.
They're not actually selling tax credits. They're just investing in an affordable housing project. And so they get the depreciation that comes with the investment into that building.
Got it.
And they also get the tax credits that, kind of flow with that.
Okay.
And so that business has really, become a huge industry of the last, and matured. And so there's now, obviously billions of dollars that flow into that space. And also, I think banks realize pretty quickly the default rates in affordable housing are slim to none. On the tax credit space, I think we're under 0.2%
really
on tax credit investments. So when banks look at this and they prioritize, kind of what types of investments they want to make in low-income communities, low-income housing tax credit deals are always at the top of the list because the loss ratios are so much less than we're making in other areas. And it's so tangible, right? Like they get to see that project they got to invest in. And banks are also required to invest in low-income communities.
Got it.
So, there was the old issue, again, historically of redlining, right? Where they would borrow from low-income neighborhoods, or not borrow, they would get deposits from low-income neighborhoods, and then they would effectively lend loans only into higher-income neighborhoods, right?
Wow.
And so the Community Reinvestment Act, which is, again, late 70s, set up this perfect recipe for banks to use low-income housing tax credits as their preferred means of investing into low-income communities.
Got it.
And the program now is become the most successful driver of affordable housing. It's led to millions of homes produced in the country. I think it does probably 99% of new affordable housing that's constructed in this country is done, and is a model now for other countries. Because we now, I helped, I help, and I was on a call this morning, like helping in the UK and other markets where they're envious of what we're doing in the US in the amount of private capital that we've been able to bring into the space, because they're providing these credits, but they still need private capital to invest in these deals. And then with that, you leverage that with debt capital that's on these deals. And so for every tax credit dollar that's given, it's probably 5 to 1 in terms of private capital that's coming in to finance those deals.
Got it. Okay. And why is the default rate so low?
So the default rate is so low. It's one of the reasons that affordable housing is just become this resilient asset class that people feel, has an attractive return, but also has this downside protection. Your rents are based on the average median income in the area, and they're restricted. So a lot of times, for the most part, the rents are a huge discount to the market rents that are in the area, right? So there's usually waiting lists, huge demand for those units, if they're if they're mostly quality units. And so the demand side's never a problem. So even, ups and downs in the market, and I've been through them, obviously. The LIHTC space really doesn't see much of an impact. They're underwritten pretty conservatively in terms of debt service coverage ratios coming out of the gate. And the tax credit investors spend a lot of time, kind of vetting these deals to make sure that you've got the right expenses in there. They're not over leveraged. And you're locked into these when you build these LIHTC deals for 15 years. So you can't sell these things for 15 years. You got to make it for that 15-year period. And the last, kind of two components to what make it really safe from a LIHTC investment standpoint is that there's also a number of guarantees that are intrinsic in the business that the tax credit investor, they're looking to invest and buy tax credits. They don't want to take the risk of the real estate, right? So they look to the developer and also their syndication partners that they're going through to make sure that they're made whole if something were to go wrong. And those investors or in developers, because they're also playing for the upside on the property in the back end, are, very, willing to provide those guarantees and also the investment that's needed if something were to go sideways to make sure that hey, we're going to fund this, operating costs, negative for 5 years because at the end of the day, we're going to own this real estate all ourselves, right?
Got it.
And it's the advantage of these deals and having the upside going to the private developers, in which the private developers are incentivized to really make sure these things stay afloat and that the tax credit investors just continue to receive their tax credits.
Okay, so let me explain this the way that I'm thinking about this. So
ChatGPT version for like an 8-year-old, which is what I do with my daughter.
Yeah, I love that. It's incredible. Okay, so you get the government, right, or private investors to invest in your deal, right? You're the developer. You're like, hey, I want to build 100 units. Great. I'm going to get money from a bank who's going to finance, let's just say 60%, 65. I'm going to have investors come who are going to buy the tax credits, who are going to come and do another, 20, 25%? You're putting in 5%, 10% equity?
No, typically
zero.
So that the equity provided by the tax credit investor is typically the total equity that's needed on the project.
Okay, wow.
Although it's changing. I mean, the industry is evolving at this point in which, I think that the stronger groups might provide some equity into those deals.
Okay.
And we do, and kind of in the right scenarios. But a lot of times, as a developer, you're providing guarantees though. So there's no one there to backstop when there's cost overruns.
Got it.
So you have a credit buyer who's providing the equity to build that real estate. But should there be a miss on, you don't, like on a typical deal, you might have LPs.
Yeah.
Right? There's no LPs here to write a check.
It's a big PG. It's a big personal guarantee.
It's a big PG, and you're building, in our case, we're building $100 million projects, right? And so if you've got cost overruns by $1 million, $2 million, which can happen, the developer is there to make sure that that you're, but from a source and uses standpoint, the source and uses are put together between, the debt that's financed on the project with the LIHTC equity that's coming on the deal.
Okay, this is even sweeter. Okay, so you get the debt to come in at 65. You get the investors to come in at the rest of it. So it's 100% financed, not with your own money. Let's just say it runs perfectly. You don't have any overruns, right? We get that. Then you are running that property for 15 years. And then at the end of 15 years, that ownership then reverts to you, the developer, and you own that fee simple. Well, the debt's still on there, but you
So
own the equity.
the low-income housing tax credit investor typically has a percentage of that upside of the back end.
Okay.
Right. And
Okay.
in the market today, like that's somewhere between 10 and 20%.
Okay.
And so they will take 10 to 20% of that back end.
Okay.
But then 80 to 90% reverts back to the developer at the end of
After the 15 years.
Correct.
So you basically, if you build $100 million property and in 15 years it's worth 200, then you own at a certain point 80% of that at quote unquote of the equity because you have debt, right?
Well,
But
you're putting your market rate hat on, right? So like,
Yes.
the way I think about it is you have restricted rents. So
Okay.
your rents are never going to go up the way you're thinking. Like this property that's 15 million is going to be worth 200.
They're restricted for 55 years?
55 years. So at the end of 15 years, they're, for all intents and purposes, still very restricted for the life. No one's putting value on that.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So really what's happening is you're going to build the example I give is you build that $100 million project,
Yeah.
right? That $100 million project might be worth, 90 at the end of the day.
Okay.
Right. And, $70 million of the debt, right, becomes 10 at the end of the day, or becomes 60 at the end of the day because you amortize down $10 million.
Yep.
Right. So now you have the difference between 60 and 90. Right. And you have the opportunity, if you're able to maintain that value at 90, to have that upside as a LIHTC developer in 15 years from now.
Got it.
Right.
Got it.
And, it's smaller numbers today when you net present value that back by 15 years because it's a long time to wait.
Sure.
But the numbers in 15 years can be substantial.
Absolutely.
Based on that time value.
So you're playing the long game.
You really have an incentive as the owner to act like an owner and invest in the project. And I think it's a great thing for the residents because, we really like investing in the CapEx and the, kind of curing deferred maintenance and all the other things that go with long-term stewardship of property, because at the end of the day, like we believe there's going to be value there on the back end.
Got it. Okay.
We have a sponsor for today's episode, and that is AI for Siri Collective. 25 listings at the moment. We're closing 4 or 5 deals a month. It's been incredible. So if you want to learn, if you're in commercial real estate, how to use AI in your business, whether you're a property manager, a broker, an investor, really anyone, we have a huge group, over 400 people in this community. And the website, if you want to go check it out, is aiforsiricollective.com. So appreciate you guys. Now back to the episode.
And so my understanding too, because what's this thing about burning off LIHTC credits and then you reissuing stuff? Because there's a couple of people I talk to who's like, that's their business model. If tax credits are burning off, then they go and try to put new tax credits. Is that similar, or is that not development? That's just
so that would be development.
Okay.
That's really redevelopment.
Okay, redevelopment.
So I'll just back up for a minute. So we have in our business, right,
Yes.
at this point, we have 3 different lines of business.
Okay.
Okay. So we have, and they function
This
as
is standard.
This is standard communities.
Okay.
We have 3 distinct groups, right? And that might help break down the way we see the industry and the way these opportunities sort of fall.
Please.
So we have a group that does new development.
Okay.
Does LIHTC deals, right? And so that we do that, and we can go into why I think that's really interesting. And we do that, across the country.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the model that we use for the new development that we just talked about. We have a group that we call AC Rehab.
Okay.
Right. AC Rehab is where we use tax credits to renovate existing apartment buildings.
Okay.
Right. Some of those may be candidates that have exited the LIHTC program. Some of those may be market rate units that we think we can convert into LIHTC.
Okay.
Right. So there's there's probably like 3 or 4 different types of opportunities. And what you're alluding to would kind of fall into that bucket of a project that's come out. And it really depends on the state. It's state by state, depends on state priorities. So we're super sensitive on the rehab space, right? In which, every state needs to prioritize new construction, affordable housing. So if there's a constraint on resources, right, those dollars need to flow into new construction, affordable housing, or they need to make sure that there's enough. At the same time, any building they lose that's existing affordable housing and doesn't stay existing affordable housing starts to become run down enough that it may need to get torn down or condemned at some point in time, would be a loss of that housing. They're gonna have to replace with new construction. So you kind of need to monitor the door of expiring deals and also the door of building new, right? So any state from a policy standpoint is thinking about those 2 things in that balance.
Got it.
And so we kind of are positioned with those 2 groups. We work on both, right? And we work with different states to try and figure out what their state mandate and priority is, and where we can be successful at scale in helping them kind of either preserve housing or bring new housing.
Got it.
And some people, focus just on that one niche of like, hey, we're going to recycle these deals every 15 years. Some states that opportunity shuts down because they say, hey, there's still 45 years left on that regulatory agreement. We've got to prioritize that new development deal over here. And, for us, we realized, maybe 5 or 7 years ago that we really needed to be multifaceted to work with states. And again, we want to be, states' trusted partner that, I think we're, potentially we're the largest developer in California of the LIHTC program.
Really?
In terms of owner of units of LIHTC at this point, right? And so I think that as we, kind of sit down with different officials, we need to be able to have that conversation and say, look, like, this deal needs to get rehabbed, this deal needs to get built. There's different components to all this, and how do we kind of satisfy all these things? And then the third group that we do is really an asset management business that we call essential housing. And essential housing is where we bring private capital in that isn't using the LIHTC program to invest into opportunities to create new affordable housing or preserve existing affordable housing.
Is that NOAA? Is that considered NOAA housing?
So it's all going to be capital. For the most part, it's capital A affordable. So it has some sort of, NOAA would be in my mind, I think of NOAA housing as the rents are affordable, but there's no restriction on it.
Yes.
So we're always typically doing something with some sort of government restriction in place on it. And those deals are a lot of what we're focused on there, or there's a lot of generational opportunities right now of guys that are retiring from the business, right? We're talking about like the, kind of how you came up with the business and I came up, like those guys now are at the point where they don't have heirs.
They're too rich, man. They don't need to do this stuff anymore.
They don't want to work in affordable housing, and their heirs don't want to work in affordable housing.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly necessary.
Yeah.
And the mission is super important. And so we want to be the home where we can take on those portfolios, those companies, and take them on. So we've done a number of portfolio transactions at this point, and we've really raised a large amount of institutional capital from either, kind of pension sovereigns, and other kind of private equity partners to kind of invest into those opportunities where we can successfully hit our mission objectives, right? Which is, really delivering at scale, safe and dignified housing for all. And two, we can show that there's an attractive return in it as well, right? And so they're doing that. So I would say that, kind of, brokers often ask like, oh, like how do I call you with an opportunity? Like, where does that go? And to be honest, like my job now is much more cultivating these teams.
Got it.
And building our brand and focused on how our different teams are properly tooled to take advantage of all these different opportunities that are coming in through those different channels. So it should come through these teams and should be one of those types of opportunities.
What is the hardest part about this? Like, why were you guys so successful in growing to as big as you are versus someone else? Like, what's the hard shit? Like, why is not everyone doing this?
So when we started, there was no affordable housing industry, right? I mean, it was just like, it was certain types of deals. There were certain programs out there. It wasn't organized, right? And there was an asymmetry of information. And I knew when I first started, right, and you can appreciate this, I'm sure, from the brokerage space, right? It was like the LoopNet and the tech space, like I started in 2001, right, was just coming of age. Right?
Yeah.
So I heard all these stories from these guys that I started with in the business that were saying, hey, I remember when I showed up at the courthouse steps and no one else was there and I stole that property for X, Y, and Z. I knew that was never going to be my, it just was not going to be my story.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm like, okay, how do I have that same asymmetric, how do I take advantage of that same asymmetric information and find interesting opportunities? And in the affordable space just was like ripe for, as you said, super complicated. People weren't understanding it. And so, we spent tons of time, kind of dissecting the documents. And for me, just like learning, and it obviously is way before ChatGPT.
Yeah, right.
Right. And you're just like reading regulatory agreements, talking to anybody you can talk to. And these light bulbs are going off like, wow, I didn't know that program existed. I didn't know that program existed. And when you get in there, you realize, and you start to become a historian of like, well, that was done from, 1980 to 1983. And this program was done from 85 to 87. And this program, et cetera. And so I think learning all those and creating and that knowledge base has become our superpower I think that we move with more urgency and speed because of that skill set than anybody else in the space. So you call us on a deal, and our team should be able to assess and understand what they can do with that program, and that what is normally very complicated for other groups to figure out extremely quickly. So a prime example of that, we just closed a month ago. I'm really proud of a conversion that our essential housing team did. It's about 1,000. It was about 1,000 unit deal, 950 units in the Bay Area in San Jose. That is a market rate deal. Greystone was selling. We jumped into the marketing process, and we were able to convert that to workforce housing that serves people that are 80% on an average median income or below. And we closed that deal from start to finish in 35 days, right?
Wow.
So we worked with CFMA was our partner on that transaction.
Okay.
And, kind of helping us put together the regulatory agreement to benefit these residents, and also renovate all these amenities that are at the project. And it's going to be a great thing for the community.
Yeah.
Great thing for the residents. And, we were competing against market rate buyers. I mean, the last comp that had sold for same price per door, same cap rate. Bay Area is somewhat beat up, right? And these market rate buyers are moving fast in 45, 60 days. And so we went to all of our partners ahead of time and said, hey, we've got to move on the same speed and urgency that a market rate buyer can do. We need to offer hard money deposits day one and be ready to go and close. And so, I mean, hats off to the team.
Damn.
And the fact that, our partner Vistria was, amazing on that.
Yeah.
And being able to get to the finish line in that 35-day period really was but that's what differentiates us. So
Totally.
Being able to jump in and perform on those timelines and know the space and know how we're going to put together, there's a structured finance angle to that. And we worked with Freddie Mac on that to do that.
Yeah.
I think it makes it really unique. And then the last thing I'll say is, I think at this point, we're not young.
You're a whale now.
I don't know whale. But
I mean, 30,000 units.
So we've gained size and scale.
Yeah.
Right? And there are projects that we can take on at this point, and that we do with our partners. And like I said, the tax credit investors, they're super worried about, they just don't want to lose their tax credits.
Yeah.
They want to invest with partners that can make sure that that's not going to happen. And we've done, at this point, it's probably 75 tax credit deals, right? And we haven't lost an investor dollar on a single one of them.
Jeez.
We have had cost overruns, and they've seen the way we act and the way we honor our commitments and see those transactions to the finish line. And I think that's a buffer. So the startup group that's coming in saying, hey, I want to do this tax credit deal. One, we're okay going non-refundable on deposits and taking on risk because we know the business so well. Two, we're able to backstop things financially that, a lot of upstarts in the business aren't able to do.
Interesting. Wow. It's so fascinating to me because that I look and I've talked to people too, and they're like, this is just my personality, but I like to find different ways. Asymmetric. My favorite word, and people know this if you listen to this, is alpha. I love the word alpha, right? Where's the alpha in the situation? How can I take advantage? What's the information asymmetry to try to make something work?
Yeah.
And it sounds like you guys found that it was the perfect combination of experience, timing, and the age that you were at, where you had the energy to go and actually make this stuff happen. That culminated into you guys becoming as big as you are, which I want to say, 30,000 from a private affordable, that's got to be top 5, right?
Yeah, I think we're up there in the top 5. We're definitely the fastest growing.
Yeah.
So, our goal in the next few years is to be the number one affordable.
Why are you growing faster than the other people?
I think it's that still same hunger we had from when we first started, right? And Scott and I are both firing on both cylinders.
Yeah.
We're bi-coastal. Scott's in New York. I'm in LA. And I think it's one, I think we're the way we've split into our teams, and we're firing on full cylinder on 3 fronts. All of our competitors have picked 1 lane, 2 lanes, right?
Got it.
And the fact that we've got those 3 is a testament to the quality of those teams. So Scott and I's, like I said before, our job at this point is, and we've said this, and Scott really said this, coined this first, but we're in a talent war.
Yeah.
Right. And so our job is, we want to get the best talent that's in affordable housing or even outside affordable housing and bring them in and educate them on affordable housing. So I spend a lot of my time helping and training people that are really successful in other careers.
Got it.
Learn the affordable housing space and come in and then launch a career within affordable housing. And we want them to work in Standard and help grow the platform in Standard.
What kind of skill set would be your A player? What kind of personality, I guess, and skills do you need to improve your business the most?
Yeah, at this point, we have needs in a lot of different places,
Okay.
right? So, when I think about the future of what we need right now, we're really focused in the next year on systems and processes and procedures in our growth, because I think that we're trying to grow with scale, but we're also trying to grow with intention, right? So, it's one thing to just like buy units and, kind of rinse and
Totally.
repeat. And I think that with intention, as we grow, a lot of that has to do with, how do we get quality access to data at scale available to all of our team that's on the ground making decisions so they can, act on that data super quick, right? And some of that's AI,
I was gonna
some
say
of that, but you can't really do AI successfully. I mean, everybody's talking about AI, right?
Yeah.
You can't do AI unless you have the data and you have the system set up to be able to build on top of, right? It's a great tool that is like on the icing on the cake, right? And so we're really trying to, focus on that foundation. And so I think that we have a number of people that have joined us recently that have a consulting background, that have worked at some of the top major consulting firms that have really been focusing on helping companies grow at scale.
Yeah.
And, processes and procedures. That's a
OKRs and
huge,
all
like the
that.
McKinseys of the world. Yeah, exactly.
I try to do that with my companies. My business companies, whatever you're gonna call it, but it's hard, man. If your brain doesn't click that way, if you're not like the spreadsheet person that has to track everything and do this, like I'm a sales guy. I just want to go out there and, get
Totally.
deals done, right?
Yeah.
But it's so important when you realize that, wait, I had to do this. And then you have a bunch of, 100 employees, 200, 500 employees. I don't know how many you have. If this person doesn't know this piece of information, then it causes this to have a bottleneck, and it like clogs the whole wheel, clogs the whole system.
Totally.
So I don't believe you in terms that you're not building AI systems because you're too smart, too cutting edge.
We are definitely building AI
Okay,
systems.
what are you
I'm just
building?
saying that we are building, you have to focus on that first layer.
What's
first.
the alpha with Jeff? You got to give me the alpha. Like what do you, I guess, how do you envision, what are the systems that you think if you guys can build are going to give you an advantage?
Yeah.
Like what is that?
So a few things that we're really focused on right now is I think that we are focused on how do we access. So affordable housing deals are extremely complex, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have 40 files in a particular deal, right?
Yeah.
Maybe 70, right?
Yeah.
Each one is 75 pages, right?
Crazy.
So the number one complaint that we have across the company is the time it takes for an employee to get access to information about a deal, right? So you're a new asset manager, you're trying to dive in, you're dealing with the property manager, trying to understand like what the rules are. And it takes you 3 days to research all the documents and get back with an answer. And that's even if you have a real background in affordable housing and, you know how to do the research. Right?
Yeah.
And so what we're trying to do is get that time frame. So in a matter of minutes, you can type into a system and it'll tell you everything you need to know about a particular deal.
Yeah. It seems like your business is even more perfect for the AI tech because it is so complex and it's so much data that needs to be aggregated and then disseminated in like a simple, like
the issue is that like AI sometimes lie, like, right?
Yeah.
So like, you can't have an asset manager make a critical decision based on AI that, that is wrong.
Hallucinating and doing
so
that stuff.
We're spending a lot of time testing the system. We're investing a lot in how we create a proprietary system to kind of research and go through our documents and, kind of have like a chatbot type system with the docs. So that's one place we're super focused. We're also trying to get access. I mean, I think there's a lot to do. We're not there yet, but there's a lot to do on the underwriting side. Like I would think for your business, right? Like you can figure out rents, you can figure out expenses, pretty simple for buildings and kind of put through and kind of go to value.
Yeah.
I think that on the development side, that sort of makes sense for us from a data standpoint, just because you're dealing with raw land. What are the restrictions? How do we, what does it cost to build? And we can kind of figure out where we think the most optimal place to build is. I think that really, again, the nuances though, for our business are figuring out these public-private partnerships that pop up in different places, right? So you go to a particular state and they're super focused on solving, we want housing that serves 60 to 80% of the average median income. And we've developed a program we're exempt real estate taxes, right? It's really hard to use AI to get in and figure out how to take advantage of that program to develop housing in that market, right?
I got a software for you. I'm not going to say it now because I think it's too valuable, but you're really going to like this.
Yeah.
There's a system that I think is going to be super valuable, but that makes total sense because you're like the opportunities pop up randomly, right? And so your team has to go and figure out where that opportunity just was created and then be able to go and act on that and help the system
and
with
move,
that and
which we're
quickly.
competing typically with a market rate buyer in that market, right? So, one of the opportunities we're thinking about a lot of right now is there's a lot of distress on Class A new construction,
Yeah, ton.
especially in overbuilt markets, right?
Okay, can you explain to me, so how would, like the deal in San Jose, right? How does it make sense? Can anyone go and convert a building to affordable? Like, what is the process of taking a market rate building and converting it into affordable? What has to be true for that to be possible?
Yeah, so you have to work with a government agency
Okay.
to record a regulatory agreement on the property and work to secure some sort of government financing that goes with that regulatory agreement that allows you to qualify for a property tax exemption. And then you have to know how to work with the state and through the county and the tax assessor to effectively show the affordable limits and which residents qualify for those limits, and that you've done the proper paperwork and certification. And once that happens, you can qualify for a real estate tax exemption. And then you got to put together your debt and equity, capital stack that may be more advantageous because you're doing something mission driven. So it allows you to get slightly cheaper capital to put that together, et cetera. So it's really a number of different, kind of groups. And again, I would say that theoretically anybody could do what we're doing.
Okay.
The question is like, can you do it in 30 days, right?
Yeah, no.
And do you know the right people to call? Do you know the programs? Do you know everything else? And that deal's gone, right?
Totally.
So we see a lot of guys who start in the business and, they end up on more of the NOAA type assets, right? And they've got them in contract for 6 months and the sellers are willing to wait because they're in the top market. And from our standpoint, for me, like being mission focused, we're not hitting on those NOAA assets. They're already NOAA. They're already affordable rents. Like we're not adding anything new.
Got it.
To an innovative to what's happening in this country in terms of, creating and making a dent in that 7.4 million, household units, right?
So what is I guess like what's attractive to you about this, or what obviously besides the alpha, like how do you make money at the end of the day? Because you said you're private, so you're trying to get returns for your investors too. Like how do you know a deal is going to make sense for you to go after? And
so, I mean, what we're really focused on right now, it's a great question. And like what we're focused on right now is, I think the benefits that also come from scale.
Okay.
Right. So think about most efficient developer in this country.
Yeah.
Bar none is the Homebuilder.
Yeah.
Right.
Lennar.
So Lennar, D.R. Horton's, right?
Yeah.
D.R. Horton built, 250,000 homes last year. Right.
And like pro what, $100 a foot and $80 a foot or something crazy like that.
Right. So and then everyone's like, oh, well, why can't we build affordable housing at scale? And you're like, well, someone's building at scale.
Yeah.
It's the Homebuilder, right? And at those, $100 a foot, right?
Yep.
So the affordable housing developer, right? I mean, if you're building 5,000 units in a year, you're probably the number one affordable housing developer in the country.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And 2,000 units in a year, you're like at the top 5 list, right? So, and then what happens is a lot of these deals get sucked into, where you're going multi-years of entitlements in these urban locations, right? You've got layers of financing that are coming in place. And when you get done, it's not repeatable, right? Because you've got some weird shaped parcel in Koreatown that you built your affordable housing deal on. Maybe you got it done, maybe you didn't, right? But at the end of the day, the next call you get from that same councilman to do the deal in Koreatown, it's be a totally different site, right? Totally new construction risk, right? Over and over. So for us, what we realize is that for us, from a monetary standpoint and kind of making profit for us and our investors, right? Like that just is not a scalable model that, is something we can do at size.
Totally.
Right? If you want to do one deal every 5 years, like, and that some people, that's their mission.
Yeah.
That's great. If, like I said, we're trying to really make a dent in that, kind of $7.4 million number.
Yeah.
What we're trying to do is basically become the home builder of affordable housing.
Got it.
Right.
Got
and
it.
so what that means is we're trying to drive to that $100 a foot as close as we can in affordable housing. And we want to use the least amount of government subsidy possible.
Okay.
And we want to deliver as quickly as possible because in development, time is money.
Yeah.
Right? Interest carry costs, et cetera. Right. So we want to deliver as quickly as possible. And then we want to be known with all the agencies we work with that, like when you work with Standard, you're working with somebody who's looking for less dollars, can move super quick, and is coming with creative out of the box thinking and capital solutions to be able to do that. And then for us, as we develop these deals, we obviously earn developer fees and we earn, kind of back end, as we talked about on these different deals. But we want to do that at scale and create that over time. And that's kind of how we're doing it.
So sick. So sick. And you're in your 40s. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it's super cool to see people pushing the boundaries, because I think I'm 29 and I see a lot of people in my industry, right? And most of the brokers are, there's a bunch of young ones and there's a bunch of old ones. And then all of the owners are super old, right? There's not a lot of young owners who own at scale, because especially when you're doing market rate, like all the guys who own bought in the 70s, probably they were doctors and lawyers and they had the depreciation stuff. Dr. Lee, Donald Sterling, like Jerry Buss, all these super wealthy guys who bought them for depreciation and then have rode the appreciation, and now they, $1 billion portfolios. Like, those opportunities are not there for people like myself, where I can buy a building for $12,000, right? A 10-unit apartment building for $12,000. It's not, and not as an excuse, but it's just a different time in this era. If you had to start over today and you're 21 years old.
I don't know if I totally agree with all of that, but that we can.
No, okay, please. Actually, rebuttal. I want to hear devil's advocate. What don't you agree with?
So I think that you're right. I mean, I think in Koreatown and West Hollywood and these areas where these guys built at the time that were areas that were forgotten. I mean, Koreatown 30, 40 years ago was like, I mean, it was nothing. You could buy, stuff for extremely cheap, and it's gentrified. And, Dr. Lee's built an incredible portfolio. I have a lot of respect for those guys.
Yeah.
And I think that, but that opportunity in those markets is not there anymore.
So you say,
does that market not exist, in other ares? Like, I think if you look at the city as a whole, people have, I think, blinders in terms of as they look at the city, and you look at, socio-demographic issues that are happening in different areas. We just like block out certain areas, right? All of South LA, right? Is like, it's a straight shot to the beach. It's like fairly close, right? There's not a lot of people that want to go deal with managing deals in South LA, right?
For sure.
Like, what is the price per door, and what do you have to deal with in terms of crime, et cetera? But like in 40 years from now, like, is that going to be dramatically different than like, what grew in Koreatown? I don't know. But
got it.
I think that it's, I'm just giving one particular
that's
location.
Fair. That's very
But
fair.
I think that you can follow those, kind of demographic trends and, kind of decide where you kind of want to stake your claim over the next 40, 50 years. Some of those guys have just lucked out.
Yeah.
I also think that, and I talk about this a lot because we have a couple other businesses that we've started that are in the public-private partnership vein. We have a private equity business as well, in which we invest in small to mid-sized businesses that serve underserved markets as well. And sort of like we work on housing so much in standard communities.
Got it.
And then Skyline Investors, which is the name of that firm, also, we realize we need to create jobs too, if you really want to make a dent in these communities.
Yeah.
And so, when I look but like our thesis overall is the fact that you have a lot of these guys that have made a lot of money over the last, 30, 40 years. And generationally, you're going through the big wealth transition, that's happening in history, right? It's never has this much wealth gone from one generation to the next.
Yeah.
And the sexy businesses, the kids want to take over, are happy to run, et cetera, right? The non-sexy businesses, the harder businesses, like, I think that you're going to see a lot of opportunities on those types of businesses in which the heirs aren't going to take them. And if you are a young person today and you can find opportunities to, kind of get your foot in the door on those types of businesses. And I mean, there's things all the way from like the trash business to the, to the manufactured housing business to the, kind of, I mean, a lot of affordable housing fits into that category, right? And it's, you're doing, a lot of times you're doing really essential work.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, a community cannot function without trash.
Yeah.
Right. But at the same time, like, those businesses are probably going to transition at some point and provide opportunities for a new generation of young people that can do it better, smarter, more technology, et cetera. And, hopefully at more scale.
So if you're 21 years old, right, where's the alpha? Where do you see that opportunity? And maybe you haven't had the time to look for those opportunities, right? Because you're so focused on what
I still look all the time for this.
Okay.
So
all right.
I'm with you on that.
I figured your personality type is one where you're just like, how can I improve? And you get ideas from different things. Like, that's why I love studying history, because my favorite podcast is not my own. It's one called Founders, because he just studies great entrepreneurs and I get to learn and see like, oh, I could do that with my business. If you're 21 years old, where would you be looking? Where's the alpha? What would you go do? Would you go buy a plumbing business, a roofing business, a property management? Would you go try to do a different?
The first thing, if you went 21,
21.
right, I gotta go back to, I think it's really important to focus on that education, right?
Okay.
So I think that, no matter what happens in your career, ups and downs, like you got to have this confidence. Like when we've been through parts of the cycle that are, that are tougher and rougher, like you got to know that you fall back, that you have a proper business training to fall back on, that like you feel like you're not going to be like, well, my plumbing business didn't work, and now what do I do with my life? Because all I did was like plumbing.
Yeah.
Right.
Got it.
And I think it's really important as you come out of school to focus on that first business education. You get that professional education of like, what does it mean to like run an institutional level shop? Right. And I see that a lot from kids that have, they go out of school, they come out of school, they work at a brokerage shop for a couple of years, and then they come in and they want to work at, a different level. It's hard for them to adjust to an institutional framework where you got to go investment committee and there's a process for buying deals, et cetera. But you got to see what that's like, right? And know if you want to grow something at scale eventually, and you're going to deal with a capital partner who's going to have that process, right?
That's what you got to do.
And then two, I think mentorship is so important still. I think you got to find that person, and it could be, for me, it was just a couple of years out of school, but like, you got to find somebody that's going to teach you the ropes of the jungle world of running a business, right? Which is, a lot of people, and we deal with a lot of founders in our private equity business, as well as, I think just friends of mine that have started businesses will tell you that like starting a business, I have the business plan, right? But starting the business part is like, just like, there's a lot that goes on, and like how you comp your team, how you, what you decide on from your office space to,
there's so many
things that go into running a business on top of all that. So I think you got to have someone where you've seen that and you've seen like a style. It doesn't, you have to repeat it, but I think you got to get a little bit of time to get that mentorship.
Okay.
And then I think you're ready to start sussing, the opportunities, but then you've got a better lens to view opportunities that they come in.
So let's say you're 29 then. You've learned, you understand how the cookie, the bake, the cake is baked.
I give you 26 like that.
Okay.
That's where I was.
Okay.
Like
26.
Yeah.
What industry, what opportunity do you see as maybe the next, maybe it's not here yet, but it will be. Obviously everyone's talking about AI. That's like the biggest thing, but that's tech. That's like, go write code.
Yeah.
That's not me. Most people, I don't think they're going to be tech people, but they could use it. Is there you think affordable is going to continue to go big, and you'd say, okay, let me go learn and understand and find some alpha in this affordable. Maybe it's, I want to go grow the biggest property management company because I'm going to use AI to be more efficient. Like, have you thought about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the other things, and I talk about this a lot with people with, I do certain teaching and whatnot. And I think that starting a real estate business and any of these sectors that we're talking about, you have to think about what your revenue source is going to be, because making investments is not a revenue source, right? And so too many young people today are like, I just want to go buy deals, right? Like that's a cool deal and buy that deal, right? And if you're on your own, and maybe you've saved up, maybe you've got other means of supporting yourself, you can buy 3 or 4 deals, right? And pretty quickly you get to an inflection point after like 6 deals where you can't asset manage all of them and also focus on sourcing deals, that you got to hire your first asset manager, right? And you got to make that call of like, okay, the salary level of an asset manager is X, right? Am I making enough on an ongoing basis in this business to hire that person? Definitely not. I got to do new deals to make acquisition fees to pay for that current person, right? And it's like you quickly realize that like just doing the investments themselves, it's really hard to scale and grow a business when you're waiting for 5, 7, 10 years for these deals to play out and to make a promote on the back end.
Totally.
And in the meantime, you're trying to just make it off acquisition fees, which most partners are like, hammering you down on, and like they're just constantly telling you you're taking too much in fees, and you got to pay keep the lights on, et cetera, right?
Totally.
And so, the question is like, then you can go and you can do, like, you can be a specialist. You got to perform a service in real estate, right?
Yeah.
Is it development? Is it, construction? Is it property management? Is it, like what avenue do you want to go in? So what I would advise is like whatever space you want to go into on the real estate side, you got to pick your channel of where you can provide a service on top of, it could be brokerage and also buying deals.
Got it.
But then you're generating revenue on the brokerage side and then buying deals.
Got it. So there's the revenue piece and then there's the equity piece.
Yes.
So you got the cash flow in and the growth.
Correct. Because you got to count on for the first several years to have much cash flow. Nobody buys real estate. I mean, very rarely do you buy real estate and then like you're flipping it next year, right?
Yeah.
So you got to be in it for the long haul, and you got to have something that you're doing to, for us, that was developing affordable housing.
Yeah.
And so developers in that regard.
And you got the fees.
Yeah. And at this point, we're now like a GC, we have an architecture company, we have we have a lot of different business lines that in that space. But I think for anyone starting in those spaces, you got to think about that. And if you're thinking about, like I said, on the private equity side, I think there's a number of businesses right now that are, again, generational opportunities where owners don't have heirs that are in the business. The businesses are worth a lot. They're looking for people to help them run and manage it. And I would be looking for, some of those opportunities to get a mentor comboed with an opportunity to, kind of potentially take on and kind of grow that business. Specifically within the real estate space, I would say that I think there's definitely interesting opportunities within affordable housing. I think it's becoming a mature sector that, like I said, is a ton of institutional capital that's flowing into the space. So I think that's one of the more interesting. I'm a little biased.
No.
I think that's one of the more interesting spaces right now.
Yeah.
I think manufactured housing is still
I was literally going to say MHP
really,
is
really interesting. I've owned and actually started a mobile home park management company.
I really want to do mobile home parks because a couple years ago we started calling.
Yeah.
And it was just apartments. And like, as a broker in LA, I just get F off, like, no, It's just so competitive. And then I would call these mobile homes. And I don't even know if I want to put this on here because it's crazy. Dude, it's like, these people have owned these for 50 years. It's Joan and John. And they're like, yeah, I don't really know what it's worth, but I'd sell it. What do you think? What's it worth? Like, it's just a different ballgame. So I love MHPs. And it's the lowest rung of housing, right? It's always going to be really housing.
So those things were all built as temporary housing, right? And they kind of like, again, it's that history, right? Where like they put them on drainage ditches in different places. Yeah. They didn't think they were going to be permanent.
Yeah.
And they became, permanent, especially in California. Cannot get another one entitled today in California.
No.
So I think
there's property taxes.
Yeah. Right? And I think there's a lot of like other auxiliary businesses that, like, if you think about developing HOAs using modular, it comes real close to building manufactured housing, but you can do it under a structure of like, kind of with effectively a mobile home.
Yeah.
And create kind of an HOA type framework.
Got it. There's a couple in Newport, right, that do that?
There are older ones that have done it, but I'm talking about like new construction, like where you did like a master plan community. And, if you think about you're selling a home, normally, let's say you're in California, your starting home prices are going to be in the Inland Empire, like $750 million, right?
Based.
And so you might say, hey, we're not going to sell you the land. We're just going to sell you the modular home that's on top of it, right? And we'll keep the land. It's under some sort of ground lease structure. And so therefore the home's like $350, right? But you got to pay X amount on an annual basis to finance the land, right? Like there's some interesting models in that space that I think, are yet to be kind of played out. There's some regulatory hurdles for sure. But I think some of that's pretty interesting.
Okay. I want to switch up a little bit because I admire the way that you think. And I can tell that you have processes, or maybe it comes naturally, or you've learned this, but you clearly know where opportunities are and think about this and reflect and try. Seems like you're very courageous to go and act and do some stuff. How do you have a process for thinking? How do you think about challenges? How do you think about overcoming situations that most people just can't overcome?
It's a great question. I think it comes back to like your team and your support, right? So I think that I bounce a lot of stuff off a lot of people, right? And Scott, who, is best friend and also, kind of co-business owner, right? Like we talk probably 3 times a day and we're constantly bouncing stuff off. So I think having a really good partner and being able to kind of go back and forth, you're able to shape ideas. I can't tell you the number of times where I call him and say like, let me just spitball with you on this. And he's like, nope, that won't work. That won't work. This is interesting. And we come at it from different sides. And I have a number of friends, and I have a great wife who, we talk about ideas and things like that. And she's great too. So I think talking about, with a number of people is really helpful to get that sounding board. I think that never be scared to like discuss your ideas with people unless you're worried they're going to steal them.
Got it.
But if you're in a trusted environment and creating that trusted environment, I think is really important.
Totally.
I think, and I also think that a lot of times, we're not the first to do something.
Okay.
Right. But we're a lot of times the first to do it with intention and scale. And so we'll see something and then say, that's really interesting. How do we do that better? How do we do that faster? Et cetera.
Got it. So you're always thinking, and that's where the systems and stuff come into play, because you have to be quick to be able to close the deal.
And you got to be
35
watching. Like
days.
today, there's just massive amounts of capital coming through the private equity firms, right? Like when I started the business, if you were a private equity firm and you were asset managing 20, $30 billion, right? You were really big.
Yeah.
Right. Those same companies like Apollo in the last 15 years have gone from like 30 billion of assets under management to like 500 billion, right? Like the amount of capital that's plowing into the Blackstones, the Apollos, the Ares, et cetera. And they've got top level talent. They can hire the best talent in the business. And so we are competing in effect from a talent standpoint with those guys.
Wow.
And also from an idea standpoint, right?
Yeah.
Like they decide they want to come into affordable housing and we need to be responsive to that. We need to understand what's happening and we have to understand the space fundamentally better than those guys that are coming in quickly trying to just get up to speed, and they're incredibly smart.
Yeah.
And so we're constantly, thinking about that and how we kind of stay that one step ahead.
They're nipping at your buds. You don't want to, you always want to have some competitive advantage for you guys to be able to stay ahead of those guys.
100%.
Gosh, it's so fascinating. We could probably talk for like 45 hours because this is just so interesting to me. And I think affordable in general and just industries that are opaque in some sense, right? There's so many different regulations. There's so many different things. You have to know everything for it to align, and you have to have a skill set, and then you have to be really good at negotiating. And there's so many skills that are stacked on top of each other that I think the barriers to entry make it very difficult, which is a great place to be in if you can have those skill sets. And clearly you guys have built that. The last thing I want to ask you is like in 10 years, right? 10 years from now, where do you want to be? Where do you want Standard to be? What is your vision for your personal life, and then where you think the company is going to be going?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and kind of going back to what you're saying, I think the really important thing is you look at these other people look at these new opportunities in different business pieces, is we're constantly focused on that downside protection. And we started the business, and one of the things that was so attractive to me about affordable housing was that downside protection. So in my last business, right, we did market rate housing across the country, and you had to be a student of all the demographics and choosing like, is Phoenix going to grow faster than Vegas? Is Atlanta going to grow? Like, where do I want to pick for my rent growth, et cetera, right? And in the affordable space, look, like, I don't want to have to be the smartest guy in the room from a demographics and a rent standpoint, right? And I know where my baseline kind of income is, and then I can kind of layer on with the structured finance angle how to make it really creative. So I think as people look at different businesses, you really want to focus on, too many people like swing for the fences, thinking they're going to get this like home run and they're going to make a ton in like, 20, 30, or 30 months, or so. But like for us, we're trying to build a resilient business that lasts beyond Scott and I, kind of in the future.
Yeah.
And, it's really, I think, and I look forward 10 years from now, right? Like, I know our stated goals. We want to be the number one affordable housing developer in the country, right? We have an internal goal that's 50,000 units by 2030.
Okay.
Right. And so those are kind of the easy ones that are there. I think that in 10 years, I think where I want the company to be is I want our teams to be I want to have top tier talent across the industry in each one of our teams. And I want to be driving to create new and innovative solutions across those different teams. And I think Scott and I continue to be kind of focused on that team building aspect and brand ambassadors for the business. And also, I think doing a lot more advocacy and teaching work on affordable housing in general. Like I have a passion for how we do housing here and how that compares to how they do it in other countries as well.
Yeah.
So I can see, kind of spending a lot more time on just kind of, just focusing on our housing expertise and how we do that.
Is that what gets you up in the morning?
I love, kind of, yeah. I mean, I love businesses in general.
Sure.
So I could talk here for hours too about like different businesses and what I find interesting.
Structures, yeah.
I find housing and housing policy really interesting. I'm surprised that you haven't asked a lot about LA politics and housing.
I know.
Just like being in Koreatown.
Well, because I'll tell you why. Because it's just very frustrating. It feels like at a certain point, what can be done when every time that we turn around, right? These owners, like something else is coming at you and you try to overcome it, and maybe you get 80% of the way there, but something chips at your knees. And they're just like chopping because there's 13 people that are making the decisions for the whole entire city and county. And it's like, how is that even possible? And the people that they represent, it's not an equal share of different demographics.
Yeah.
Like it's one demographic that's making all the decisions for the whole city. How can that make any sense from democracy? Like it's not democratic.
I really encourage you to do more on your podcast to speak on that front, because I'm very vocal about it.
Yeah.
I think as someone who's a housing expert, like the city has really not been super pro housing. And I mean, I know a number of developers that have been building affordable housing in Los Angeles for years that no longer want to build in LA in terms of affordable housing. I mean, you have this week, I don't know if you saw this week, they're trying to raise the, kind of a required minimum wage on residential construction. I think it's 10 units or more, right? Up to $32. And the argument they're making is that they need more workers, right? And so they need to raise the wage to get more workers to come, to build affordable housing, which is like, and so when you really pull back the onion and you think about it, there aren't that many votes that are putting a lot of these council people in office.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's really important that people, one, vote, two, understand, the numbers that are there. I mean, it's 5,000-6,000 votes are swinging the elections in some of these locations. And a lot of the folks that are are backing the current candidates that are there are well funded. And there's really good, kind of networks on the ground in terms of funding.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've seen in San Francisco recently.
Incredible.
It's really incredible. Some of the turnaround. I was just up there, 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And I was like, I mean, from when I went there 2 years ago to 6 months ago, it's like mind boggling.
Wow.
I'll make a shameless plug. There's an organization called Vibrant LA.
Okay.
That's, really kind of focused on pro-business in LA and really kind of educating people on various candidates.
I like it.
And so if you, kind of look out for them and they'll kind of tell you who, which candidates are kind of pro-business versus, and it's not necessarily a political stance. It's really about like who's in it to benefit the city at the end of the day, kind of a pro-business standpoint, which I think benefits everybody. Again, if you translate the numbers on housing to the drag on the economy from not having housing, it is way more significant than all these other, kind of pieces of legislation they're trying to push.
It blows my mind.
And safety, security, cleanliness, like all that stuff, which is just...
Have you been to MacArthur Park?
Yes. Have you been there in the evening?
No, and I don't even want to be close to it. I drove by the other day on the way to a tour, and I'm like, how can a city stand by and let this be just there? Like it is, people are smoking crack, like literally on the sidewalk. They're selling drugs. They're passing it. People are sleeping everywhere. It is chaos. It is like...
It's lawlessness.
It's lawlessness, and it's in the middle of our city, in a landmark that should be the center for and they're trying to do these things that clearly like supply and demand. It just works. Right. And so it very frustrates me. I get it. I understand the moral, they hide behind the moral situations for them to help the renters. I think you should help the renters. And I think you should help the renters by making the rents less. And how do you make the rents less? You make it easier to build more housing.
Well, look, there's all sorts of policies, right? And I don't think that we've done a great job of educating the public and also our own city council, right, as to what the real issues are. Right? And so I think everyone can hide around an affordable housing crisis, which there is one. Do they, kind of, bifurcate? There is a section of the populace that, and we house some of these people, we try and house some of these people that are not properly in a mental state to be housed and to stay in housing. Right. And so how do you bifurcate and deal with that issue that's there when you have tremendous drug usage, et cetera, which being on the street can lead to more drug usage and it's all cyclical. Right. But, you clearly need to build more housing. But you clearly need to, kind of organize, kind of the system in such a way to be able to give people two options to say, hey, you can get help, right? And you go down this door, you get help, right? And we either find you housing, we find you, if we don't deem you suitable to be able to get into housing, you can go here and then get into housing, get clean first, right? But you got to choose to go one of those two directions, right? Or there's another option that is more intense and you're not able to just sleep out on the street and
Yeah.
go wherever you want, right?
Yeah.
And you're seeing, what's interesting, I think, is you're seeing in communities across the country, and we do this nationally, speak to it, but like the countries that got hit, areas of the country that got hit first with the opioid crisis, they have set up this infrastructure for dealing with this, this influx of cheap methamphetamines, et cetera. And so they have a more stringent system, in some of these local counties and jurisdictions in which they're saying, hey, you either get help or get yourself in housing or you effectively go to jail.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And at jail at any time, if you raise your hand and you're like, hey, I want help, I want to get clean, you come out.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, it's crazy to me that like they're seeing real positive outcomes happen.
Totally.
In which now they've got recovering addicts that are getting jobs,
Wow.
coming out, becoming functional, getting in housing, et cetera. Right. But you can't, the 101 in AA, right, is like, you don't just like give, like, you don't just
go back on MacArthur Park and be like, hey, you want some more crack?
Yeah, no, you don't just continue to give in AA. If you have a relative who's kind of a problem, you have to have some sort of like hard door to say like, hey, you got to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Right. And so I just think that I'm all for compassion. And we try and do that with our services and everything else. And we need to bring services to all these people. And we're in no better place to do it than in our housing. But just LA, I think it's become really challenging because it's just gone. And San Francisco went way too far outside, and they're kind of coming back.
Yeah.
Hopefully, more housing getting built in San Francisco and kind of more projects. So
we're going to have to do a round 2 and talk more about LA, because I can tell you're passionate about it. I'm passionate about it. I think there's a lot that can be done. And I think there's a lot of people who watch this who can be a help and actually make a change in the current reality.
Yeah, you're watchers or voters, and they're the people that are going to influence these elections and are putting these people in. And I just encourage like the taglines on initiatives and things like that. They're just so deceptive. Like when you get in and realize what they're actually passing.
Yeah. Do your research, stand for something, right? Understand your beliefs and make decisions based upon that, not just a blanket one side or the other. Jeff, thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely.